Well, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, I am Sarah Leonard. I'm the president and CEO of the Alaska Travel Industry Association, and it's so nice to be back in person. I want to acknowledge KPEDD as one of the early organizations I worked with around tourism and economic development, and Tim as one of my and ATIA, the association's biggest and longtime supporters. So well wishes to Tim. And the whole KPEDD, the small but mighty team, has always been a huge supporter and has welcomed ATIA to the Industry Outlook Forum. I think I've been at almost every Industry Outlook Forum for my tenure at ATIA. I've been there 10 years. And like I said, I know last year I was zooming in and it was a little bit awkward. I couldn't see any of you, so I'm super appreciative that I'm here in person to be able to share with you a little bit more about ATIA. I'm just going to practice this. Oh, it's up there too. Very good. I have some initial visitor industry research from a comprehensive study we launched this spring and throughout the summer. I'll talk a little bit about statewide results, but also we narrowed it down to the Kenai Peninsula. We couldn't drill down just yet to Homer, but hopefully it'll give you some information moving forward into next year. A lot of our tourism marketing efforts and programs are informed by the visitor research that we do. And then I'll talk just really briefly about some trends that we monitor nationally through our partners like the U.S. Travel Association and other research groups. So I'll go ahead and get started. ATIA is the statewide industry association. We are a 501c6 nonprofit organization that has been the longtime manager of the state's destination marketing program, Travel Alaska. We also lend a voice on tourism issues at both the state and national, sometimes international level for the tourism industry. That could be comments on federal legislation or advocating for investment in tourism marketing dollars at the state level. We've been involved in international discussions around Arctic policy as just another example. And then we, as a membership organization, provide member benefits, and that involves networking opportunities for our members. We support 4 to 5 chapters throughout the state that are based in different regions of the state. We also, one of our biggest and most valued member benefit is our annual industry convention and trade show, which we rotate around the state, primarily in Anchorage, Juneau, and Fairbanks, but we also, on the 4th year, do an outlying community, and we just visited Sitka. Next year, we will be in Fairbanks, and we bring together, it's in October, and we bring together our over 600 tourism business members and partners at the end of the summer season to talk about trends, celebrate successes. And I'll tell you, after 2 years of really tough times and growing out of the pandemic, to echo some of your comments, I am so impressed and grateful to be part of a tourism community that really also did come together, showed their resiliency. The tourism businesses in our community statewide are competitors, but in the pandemic, they came together to really compete against the disease and COVID to be able to recover together and come out of it. And I will say that we are on the road, if not well ahead of recovery for the tourism industry overall. There are some segments I'll talk about briefly that are a little slower to recover, but super excited to be back. Visitors came back. We'll talk more about that on the Kenai Peninsula. I'm sure some of you experienced that, or many this summer. But we're out of the pandemic, I think, for the tourism industry. So just to talk about, as a statewide tourism marketing organization, and really the statewide destination marketing and management organization for Alaska, how we work with different community partners. So our role is, especially through the management of the Travel Alaska Marketing Program, is to market Alaska as a destination to the rest of the world. And we have target audiences and potential travelers that we share messages with. We partner, though, all the time with community partners like the Homer Chamber of Commerce or Soldotna Chamber of Commerce or the Seward visitor center, Seward visitor destination program to complement their strategies, their marketing efforts to bring those visitors in Alaska to your region or your community. I've been talking about the statewide destination marketing program. So during the pandemic, we did not receive state funds in a normal year. We advocate for state investment as a kind of public-private partnership with Travel Alaska and ATIA to manage those funds to implement a statewide destination marketing program. But with the Governor Dunleavy did make us an eligible recipient for an Economic Development Administration non-competitive grant that the legislature approved to implement the Travel Alaska program this year and into next year. And that's about a $10.5 million budget. And this graph just shows in a very broad estimate how we implement those funds through marketing strategies, whether it's advertising. We attend travel trade shows both domestically and internationally. We're going back. Some of those shows are now coming back more and more in person. I'll talk really more about our research efforts. We haven't had funding in the last, over the pandemic to do some comprehensive and updated research. And so I'm not really a data geek, but super excited to start getting back some of these results from this summer. We implement public and media relations efforts that can involve providing assistance to reporters or travel writers or bloggers, and also hosting familiarization tours in different communities with media representatives. And then we host the main Alaska consumer traveler website at travelalaska.com. So overall, this is a brief slide and talk about travel recovery that we're seeing nationally from partners like the U.S. Travel Association, which is the advocacy organization nationally that helps lend a voice to federal issues around the hospitality industry in the United States. We have seen through them that domestic leisure travel is almost at full recovery, if not recovered from the pandemic and back to 2019 levels. Now it's lower than what it would have been without a pandemic, but we're seeing in domestic leisure travel in all destinations, including I would say Alaska, that domestic leisure travel has recovered. Domestic business travel has been sort of an up and down, more maybe flat recovery as people weren't as fast to come back to attend meetings and events in person. But that is at a slower rate recovering nationally as more and more trade show and events and business meetings are being held in person, like today. And then international inbound travel has probably been the slowest to recover, and we're seeing from the U.S. Travel Association that they're predicting it will be the slowest to recover, but that rate is increasing as as the United States has lifted the visa requirements for entry by international travelers or into the United States. And with border crossings and opening up of the Canadian border, those things lend to a faster recovery and more international travel. Before I jump into some of the trends and things that we've been tracking, and especially as we've come out of the pandemic, I think the hospitality industry, from small businesses to large cruise ship partners, really are looking at travel differently. I just want to mention that as far as travel recovery, the other thing we're hearing from U.S. Travel Association is that, and I'm sure you have heard about it in economic development discussions at municipalities and boroughs, that we hear of signs of recession, and I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to go into data points about recession or the economy, but I will mention that what we're hearing as far as travel is that travel and tourism could fare pretty well, because even though consumers are experiencing signs of recession in higher fuel prices, higher costs, we are noticing that people have savings still, and that they're still using their discretionary income to purchase travel. People are still, even with the signs of recession, taking trips. National research has shown recently that people expect to take trips and are planning trips in the next 6 to 12 months. So we're not seeing a huge impact yet on recession data points affecting the travel and tourism industry. It might be a slower rate, but it also might be an effect of that this might be a soft recession versus some past recessions, and that's all I'm going to say because I'm not Neil Fried or an economist, but I just wanted to get across the point that what we're seeing is that so far, any signs of risk to the recession, that travelers are not reacting in a negative way so far. Other things that we are tracking, or that kind of came out of the pandemic, are themes around sustainable travel. So this sort of blends or overlaps with that resiliency message that you brought up, and that I think we've talked about coming out of the pandemic. That's been a buzzword. Travelers are looking at travel differently. I think it's been an effect of when travel completely shut down in many places, and certainly in Alaska, that as it began to open up, travelers were thinking differently both about safety issues and interaction with the communities that they were visiting. So in a research study, from a research study that it interviewed through an American Express digital research study, they interviewed travelers from different various international countries. And they responded that 72% agree that they have a passion for traveling to destinations that help boost tourism revenue and the local economy. So supporting local is a huge theme we're seeing. 68% agree they're trying to be more aware of sustainable, friendly business practices when they choose what brands to travel with. Over half, so over a majority, say they're interested in carbon negative travel, and 60% agree they want to book with airlines that have a carbon neutral commitment. We're hearing also more and more at the US travel level, their travel policies have mirrored or have adjusted to focus on some sustainable travel initiatives, including a tax credit at the federal level for the use of sustainable aviation fuels. So we hear a lot of that from our airline partners. An enhanced tax credit for electric vehicle charging stations, tax deductions for efficiency upgrades to buildings like hotels or accommodations or convention centers, and federal investments to restore natural attractions or just funding for some of our natural resources, whether it's our national parks or forests. These are things that have risen at the federal level as themes and topics and in specific legislation. And the U.S. Travel Association is complementing with their U.S. travel priorities. So ATI is watching these closely to see what things that we can support at a statewide level that help grow Alaska's tourism economy. And then social media is up and down. I'm sure many of you have seen the challenges or messages on social media about platforms like TikTok, but we are continually tracking the best way or the ways that travelers are using social and digital media. And from one quote from a Travel Agent Central article, the author said, if you're not using these platforms in your destination marketing or marketing efforts, you're missing the opportunity to engage with people at an age when they're susceptible to your ads. So that's not only for young folks using social media. I'll admit I know about as much about Facebook, but I have to go to my 18-year-old son for anything else beyond that. But they're the pipeline into the new traveler, but we're seeing more and more, even an older generation of travelers are using social media platforms. So now I'm gonna jump into our visitor research studies, switching gears here completely. We were able, through the federal grant that I mentioned, through the Economic Development Administration, to launch a comprehensive statewide study year-round. It began at the end of May, so really launched more in depth for our summer season, and it will continue through April of 2023. Where we haven't been able to collect research, I would say, in the last 3 to 4 years. So really important for us to update our visitor research and be able to show those results to communities like you and to our state legislators and our other elected officials. And it informs everything that we do with our marketing program. So the comprehensive study involved intercept surveys of visitors at points of interest throughout the state. So these are actually in-person interviews on a tablet that we had researchers conduct with visitors at different ports in Southeast Alaska, or also it was at the Denali Visitor Center this summer in the interior. We had folks throughout South Central at different points of interest where we could interact with visitors on their trip and ask them a similar survey instrument question. Our researcher partner at Destination Analysts also are conducting an online panel survey of US travelers to Alaska. So that's an online survey, same instrument that they'll reach out to travelers to Alaska. And then we incorporated online surveys of ATI's partners-owned audiences. And this is where we partnered with our own email distribution lists and also our community partners who bought into it, where we could send the same survey instrument with the opportunity to add a couple of customized questions to their own email distribution lists. So here it shows what the responses we have so far year to date, and I believe this is through October, what they were able to capture. These are unweighted, so I just want to clarify that. So I'm giving you initial results of the unweighted results from the fielding dates of May through October, August for the national panel survey, and also the ATI Partners Own survey. So we've almost reached 3,000 responses overall, and it shows the different sample collection for those 3 different components of the study. So to dive in, what I've done is shown on one side the specific results for the Kenai Peninsula visitor profile. So these are that we were able to segment out high-level results, and I've compared in some of the slides how this compares to the statewide visitor, and that's the one that's unlabeled. And so forgive me, I'm looking up too to remind myself, so if you see me looking up, I hope that isn't distracting, but thank you for having that up there. I just feel kind of funny, like looking up as I'm talking to you. So anyway, statewide, so for the primary purpose of visit, statewide, our visitors are coming for leisure and personal travel, which makes sense for our busy summer season. On the Kenai Peninsula, this percentage, if you can see that, is larger for the Kenai Peninsula versus the overall statewide visitors. So a lot of people are coming to the Kenai Peninsula for leisure and personal travel. The average length of stay per region, this was interesting. We shared some of these initial results at our annual convention and trade show. We are seeing that there are longer stays on average overall statewide. This could be a function of the type of visitor that's coming. But overall statewide, in the South Central region, the average length of stay is almost 5 nights. In the Kenai Peninsula, for that visitor profile, I put there in the green, it's a longer stay overnight. So again, it could be the type of visitor that's visiting, but overall, your visitor to the Kenai Peninsula is staying on average more nights. The traveler type statewide, so this is interesting also. In past years or pre-pandemic, ATI has reported that we received most of our travelers by cruise ship. It was close to 60% during the summer season, and then 40% was made up by air travelers and road travel. That's kind of flipped after the pandemic. So statewide, for various reasons, cruise ships weren't at full capacity and started later in some areas. We're seeing that this past summer, visitors came 35% by cruise, and certainly an increase in the independent travelers to Alaska. On the Kenai Peninsula, this is even more pronounced in that your independent traveler for this summer was almost at 75%, with a lower percentage of cruise ship visitors. It might not be a surprise to you, but overall, this was a flip in statewide visitation for us to see. The demographics overall, we're seeing a little younger audience. Our target visitor to Alaska is getting a little younger, so 38% is the biggest group, boomer or older. We're seeing growth in areas of the millennial and Gen X visitor. On the Kenai Peninsula, your visitor is a little older that have visited this last summer, so almost 50% are boomer and older to the Kenai Peninsula, and then kind of similar percentages through the different target audiences. So this is specific to the travel party composition to the Kenai Peninsula. People, the majority are coming with their significant other, their partner or spouse, that's 68%, and then it falls down pretty dramatically to the next highest percentage of 17, where they're traveling with their family or children under 18. And then I think you can see some of those percentage, it kind of falls down through there, but majority of people are coming with their partner or spouse. This is probably no surprise, and this mirrors statewide visitors, but the Kenai Peninsula visitor this summer mostly came from the United States. There is a trickle of international visitors from Canada, the UK, Germany, Belgium, and Australia. And those international countries make sense to Alaska's top 5 top international visitors, even pre-pandemic. We normally see our top international visitors from Canada, the UK, and German-speaking Europe, with growing audiences in India and Mexico. So this is also, these stats are particular to the Kenai Peninsula. There's no statewide here. I drilled down to the Kenai Peninsula visitor profile. For the lodging type, over half are staying in hotels, but we did list a variety of different accommodations for visitors to respond to. So the next percentages in the 20s are vacation rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs, resort lodges on the road system, so our wilderness lodges or roadhouses. And then people did have the option to choose that they were staying on a cruise ship or boat, so that's 20%. And then the next percentage grouping is around 16%, which shows with friends and family, or camping in either an RV or motorhome, cabins. And then again, it falls down to bed and breakfast, motels, tent camping, and resort or backcountry off-the-road system lodge. The top activities for the folks that responded on the Kenai were wildlife viewing. Not a surprise there, it's always a top activity. It has been in past surveys, but what has risen to the top 5 are people who are choosing the local cuisine, which might not be a surprise for us that have lived in Alaska or from Alaska. We enjoy such fresh and wild seafood and local products. But as far as our visitor research, local cuisine hasn't really risen to the top percentages of what visitors have responded to. And I think that this is also a theme we're seeing coming out of the pandemic, that people really want to experience what locals are experiencing, or they're looking at supporting local businesses, locally grown food products, local cuisine. But kind of surprising in this visitor study that it rose to your top second activity. And then hiking, shopping, photography, that's just a blip that it's on there twice. Breweries and distilleries, bear viewing, and fishing, of course. So we also asked questions around visitor satisfaction, and even with the tough summer that we heard from many of our small business members around hiring, workforce challenges that made things challenging for whether you were running a restaurant or an accommodation to provide a level of service to really a lot of visitors that came back this summer, thankfully. Visitors were complimentary. They had a good time in Alaska, and so I think that's a testament to the businesses, our small business operators who continue to commit to provide quality experiences to our visitors. So in the 90s, around service and hospitality, the activities that they enjoyed, their overall trip, their interaction with locals, I think where it drops to the value for money and lodging is really comes out of, again, those workforce challenges, or sometimes those changes in when things were open, or folks might have had to change their itinerary. Really, I think what we were hearing was because of the lack of staffing or workforce challenges. The businesses had to adjust, and also there were higher prices in accommodations throughout the country that we saw with hotel rates, which we are starting to see come down now. Here was another percentage that we look at, or a statistic that we look at in planning our marketing messages, that when are people planning and booking their travel to Alaska? So this is for the Kenai Peninsula. We also have statewide numbers that are complementary to this, but we are noticing overall that people are planning and then booking in shorter time frames than what we've normally experienced over many years, where the fall has been sort of the wave season, or when we have placed marketing messages in media for potential travelers to see. That is like 9 months, sometimes 12 months out from when they would plan their trip to Alaska the next year. But over the course of, even throughout the pandemic, we were seeing people plan and then actually book their trip in shorter time periods. So I've circled where that's really kind of scrunched together in those percentages, where people are looking at their planning 4 to 6 months in advance. Typically, we've seen the 7 to 12 months in advance, but you can see that it's getting shorter and shorter, and then actually booking, over a third are booking 4 to 6 months in advance. So this, for those marketing folks out there, or businesses planning for their next busy season, whether it's winter or summer, people are looking at shorter time frames of when they're making their decisions to book travel. This is the same for both the Kenai Peninsula, and I think it mirrored exactly, and the statewide visitor, is that we have first-time visitors, over half, but we have a really nice percentage of repeat visitors, which is great to see. We don't say that Alaska is your bucket list anymore. We want people to come back to Alaska. And we have 40% folks say that they are repeat visitors to Alaska, so this is a really nice number. I touched briefly on some of the challenges we heard from our small businesses around jobs and employment, and this has been, I know, a challenge not only for the hospitality sector coming out of the pandemic, but also other industry sectors. During the pandemic, I would say the hospitality travel industry nationally in Alaska was probably hit the hardest than other industries that were able to operate and mitigate COVID guidelines during the pandemic. We are seeing job growth in Alaska. I looked up the recent numbers for October, and that leisure and hospitality statewide had increased. I want to say, I think they increased like something over 1,000 jobs. So that's great. We are growing back and hiring back more people into our businesses. I would put a caveat on that our industry lost so many jobs at the onset of the pandemic that it takes a lot more to get back to that, but we are seeing improvement, and I've heard our state economists also talk about how we are getting people back into some of the hospitality jobs. But I wanted to mention around coming together as an industry and with the support of an Economic Development Administration grant. One of the programs that ATIA developed, or campaigns, at the beginning of the pandemic with our partners like at KPEDD and other arters and industry groups around the state, we pulled together what we called the Ready Together campaign, which provided tools and resources for businesses operating in the pandemic and then coming out of the pandemic. And this involved online signs and things that they could put in their stores, messaging around masking when we had those type of messages, and also industry protocols, operations and safety guidelines that a business could incorporate into their own business to operate safely during the pandemic, and those that they wanted to take with them and kind of lessons learned out of the pandemic. We also did a marketing campaign in state around those messages and those tools and resources targeted to the travel and tourism businesses and our community partners in Alaska. And then as we were hearing more and more about the workforce challenges in Alaska from businesses across the board, this theme, and I know it continues today, around hiring and having that pipeline of workforce, we shifted the campaign to do an in-state and out-of-state Work for Alaska Tourism job recruitment campaign. And we used some of our previous graphics that we had around Alaska Tourism, or Tourism Works for Alaska, to Work for Alaska Tourism. And we did social and digital media and airport placements in Alaska to try to reach some rural communities and non-traditional partners about, hey, maybe your summer job, stay in Alaska and work for a local business. We also advertised nationally to, while we really strive to hire locally and advertise or recruit locally, we really don't have the workforce. We have to look to outside forces for some folks to hire and bring folks into Alaska. So the campaign served over 38 million impressions, driving 72,000 site visits to a landing page where we have job postings still listed at alaskatia.org. So as an industry or small business, you can post a job for free at alaskatia.org, and we're driving with our campaign folks to go to those landing pages. Facebook and Instagram were the top performing platforms for that campaign during the summer. And then the paid social alone, so our paid social media tactics alone drove over 750 apply now conversions. So that's how we track that people actually clicked on the job application link from our website. I know that's kind of an anticlimactic way to end, but I want to keep us on time. I see some fluttering up here, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you so much again for having me and letting me share some of our initial information with you.